how is everybody today? We brought the band back together and we are in our second season. So we have Margaret and Jason Morales is our videographer in the back. We are so happy to have the second season and to see everybody here. I was telling somebody recently, it was an evening event, Southern Jewish Voices, and I will be honest and say I wanted to keep it an evening event, but I was wrong, clearly, because to have all of you here is just wonderful. I got to meet Ronne just a few weeks ago, and it was wonderful. It is kind of a difficult time right now, right? But the timing is. I know that Ronne's going to talk a lot about her work in Israel, and I think that's going to be really, really good to hear and for all of us. So, thank you all, and I will turn it over to Margaret.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the introduction, and Ronne for being here. And it is really fantastic to see such a large crowd here today. A testament to Ronne's popularity and to the power of offering lunch. So just to echo a little bit of what Elizabeth said by way of introduction, Ronne was actually supposed to be our final guest last season in June. And then my son decided to come a little bit early, so we canceled our session, but I'm actually really glad that we're having Ronne open season 2 instead, because originally I was really interested in speaking with Ronne because I wanted to learn more about her experience growing up in Jasper, and we're still going to talk a little bit about that today, but we're also going to talk a lot about Israel, which has been a really central part of Ronne's volunteer and advocacy work, and so I think this conversation is going to be even more timely, so things really worked out how they should in that sense. So with that, I still, though, would love to start, Ronne, by learning just a little bit about your early life. So you told me that you grew up in Jasper with 15 to 18 other Jewish families, and I'd love if you could just start by telling us a little bit about what that was like.
I had a thought that it was a lot like Mayberry. I don't know that I could compare anybody to Barney Fife. And you can tell how old the people are by the ones that giggle and the ones that don't giggle. I think my growing up time was simpler times for everybody, when you could walk across town to your cousin's house and nobody worried that you were going to be picked up by some pervert, that you were safe. And I walked home every day from school to my grandmother's house because she had fresh oatmeal cookies. And they didn't have a lot of sugar because she was very forward thinking even those days. But, just a simpler time and a simpler place. And I don't think growing up in Birmingham was like that. Or at least it wasn't for my children. Yeah. But my growing up was quiet.
Okay. And I was surprised to learn that there was actually a synagogue in Jasper from you. What was that synagogue like, and how was it sustained by such a small community?
Synagogue was built in 1911. My grandparents were founding members, as were, so all of you know, or all you older people know, Elaine Luria is my cousin. So Michelle's grandmother was my grandfather's sister. So they were the founding members of Temple Emmanuel. There was a synagogue there. We did not have we certainly didn't have a cantor. We didn't have a permanent rabbi. We had students that came in once a month. And I'll answer the next question before you ask it. 1952. My father was president of the synagogue, temple's my word. And he goes to the train to meet the student rabbi coming in for the holidays. And the young man gets off the train, and my father introduces himself, rabbi introduces himself, and the rabbi says to my dad, "I know you." And, just one of those Jewish geography, you look like
Yeah.
somebody I know. And my father takes him to the hotel. He picks him up for dinner or for synagogue, and Hugo reaches in his wallet and pulls out his liberation papers. My father had signed his liberation papers. And so there's a book called Chasing Shadows by Naomi Green. It's the story of her father, Rabbi Hugo Green, Gryn. And that it tells the story in the book. That, just the eerie thing. So after seeing, after knowing Hugo at age 2, Donald and I went to visit him in 1984 when he was still rabbi at
Big Reformed congregation
in London. Yeah. So
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. That was such a powerful story, and I want to kind of put a pin in that too, and we'll circle back a little bit to how your father's experiences impacted your commitment to Holocaust education as well. But that is such a great story. One other story that you shared with me about your synagogue that I'd love if you could tell was you told us a little bit about the community seders that
Oh.
would take place there. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
So when I moved to Birmingham, I didn't know people had family seders or individual seders, because in Jasper, we were all a family, and there was Uncle Ike and Uncle Babe and Aunt Becky, and everybody was aunt and uncle. Nobody's family was that large except for the Mays, who had a lot of children. That's from me talking with a lot of children. But everybody was aunt and uncle. So we had a temple seder. The room downstairs was not nearly this big, I don't think. Maybe half this size. And we would squeeze 100 people in there. And you were really, really tight. And there's a tablecloth that someone, I don't know who, embroidered. There's a giant Star of David, and then off the points of the Star of David are all the family names, all embroidered in blue. So I was given the family jewels and the tablecloth. It is now at the museum in New Orleans. So when you go there, ask to see the Jasper tablecloth.
I just think that is so cool, and I definitely will be looking the next time I'm in New Orleans for it.
But the other good part of that story is when you have a temple seder, you knew whose matzo balls you wanted and whose matzo balls you didn't want.
That is really great, and it does sound like such an idyllic upbringing in so many ways. But I am wondering, I'm sure some in our audience are wondering, in such a small Jewish community, did you face anti-Semitism growing up in Jasper?
I'm going to say not at all. Certainly not like here. And I don't know if that was that it was a different time
Yeah.
or a different place. Now, I did see the KKK once, in garb once. One of the families that worked with my father, they had a cross burned in their front yard. But it wasn't until I left Jasper that people said something to me about Jewing you down, or being afraid for my soul, or things like that.
That is interesting, and yeah, there's no way to know, but I do wonder if it's, about an era, or if there's something different about being in a small town and being sort of integrated into the...
And all the stores were Jewish merchants.
Yeah.
And, small town, you run in and you say, charge it, and you run out the door. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting just to, share a little bit back. My father's family were merchants in a small town in Arkansas, and I feel like I've heard, similar things, and maybe it is something about sort of the familiarity in a small town, that people can sort of know each other and be familiar with each other in that way. But I am curious, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your family's store and background as merchants. And I know that ties into how they got to Jasper originally, and then we'll start moving to Birmingham.
My grandfather, all of my grandparents, Russian, Polish, depending upon where the border was. My grandfather was a peddler, carried a pack on his back going to the coal mines. And Alan still has my grandfather's harness in his office, framed. He hasn't donated it to the museum yet. I don't think he will. And my son David has my grandfather's gun that he carried, that with a plaque under it, shot once in anger, shot once in defense, whatever.
Interesting.
But my grandfather was a peddler, and from there they had one store, and it was a big store I think of it as a central location, but now that I think about it, it was at the end of town, not in the middle of town where your family store was, in the middle of town. But when everybody went away to war, my mother was the youngest. She was left minding the store. My grandfather was ill, and my mother was 17 running the family business. And, people traded chicken or eggs or whatever for merchandise. But then after the war, when it was hard to get a job, and my parents were married and looking for a place to live, it was like, well, we'll go into the family business, and then came Top Dollar stores.
I didn't ask you this in our preliminary conversation, but I'm kind of curious, was there ever an expectation that you or siblings would continue in the family business, or not really?
Oh, no, those were the male chauvinist days.
Okay.
Where the older children were girls, and girls didn't do that. So the business was sold in 1968.
Okay, interesting. So that is interesting. Okay.
Those were the days.
Well, I do want to keep moving us along in time, even though I could probably stay on Jasper forever with follow-up questions. But tell us about coming to Birmingham and transitioning into this Jewish community. And within that, would love for you to tell us about, originally I would have said meeting Donald, but I know it was really reconnecting with Donald, which is kind of cool.
So coming to Birmingham was divine intervention. There was no plan. There was no thought process. It was just one day I drove to Birmingham, called a real estate agent that I knew, and bought a house. I mean, it just boom. And had to be somebody else directing me as to what to do, because I had 2 babies, and I have no idea. When I got home and my phone rang, and my father said, "Where were you? I've been trying to call you all day." Thank goodness, no cell phones. So, and I said, I was in Birmingham. I bought a house. You did what? So it was just accidental on my part, divine intervention on somebody else's part. And, coming to Birmingham, I knew a few people. My cousin Jan still lived here at the time. I think. Pretty sure they did. For just a minute. And I had some older friends. Betty Loeb was the first person to invite me for dinner. And Jane Bluestein and I drove carpool. I had this was no GPS, no car phones, no nothing.
Yeah.
Small town girl at a notebook, 3-ring, whatever you call it, in my binder, in my car, from house to center, from center to house, house to grocery, because all of you who live in that area, so I lived on Eaton Road, and you can get really, really lost. I mean, really, and especially at night. So I think one of the biggest transitions was learning my way around from a small town to a big town. And then I joined the jazzercise class with Nan Plazitz here at the center and made friends with Sharon Cutter. And, it's just, you find your way doing things and joining things. Stuart would come to class, jazzercise class with me, and I'd sit him in a chair with his little bag of toys. He would never move, and he would sit through the class
That's very impressive.
however many days a week that was, So that was then. And then there was this phone call saying, do you recognize a voice out of your past? And I said, how far back in my past? So Donald and I had dated in high school, and we'd both gone these separate ways. And then he read that I had moved to Birmingham in the Temple Bulletin. So there's a lot to be said for TYG and Temple Bulletin and all those. Tell your children.
Makes me glad that we're still putting out a bulletin.
Yeah.
I love that story, though, and it's actually a great transition, I think, into talking a little bit more about your interests in Israel, because you shared with me that your first trip there was your honeymoon. So can you tell me a little bit about that first visit?
Our first trip, November 1980, was with 10 bus loads of Jews from around the country. And since we were the only two from Birmingham, we were on a bus there were one couple from Las Vegas, Philadelphia, maybe New Orleans, I don't know, whatever. And there were two best stories from that trip. This woman, we were stopped somewhere for some reason, and this woman from Philadelphia says to me, you can't be Jewish the way you talk. Do you cook Jewish food for your children? Well, there is a mama bear in all of us. And, everybody from around the bus was sort of like this. And I replied to her that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Shut her up. But, and the other was, just the camaraderie of being with 10 busloads of Jews from around the country and having so much in common with everybody. Just the sharing, the stories are similar, the tunes are similar, the experiences are similar.
That does sound like a really powerful experience. And I do feel like for a lot of people, that first visit to Israel, it is sort of being in a fully Jewish environment that's so affecting. I'm curious, too, what it felt like for you just being in that place for the first time and sort of how that felt or how you connected to place on that first visit, if that makes sense.
Gosh, I remember being, those were in the days when we were caucusing. So I remember being in caucus is when you're asking for money. And everybody's talking about their own story of their connection and why they give and how much they're going to give. And I remember the people in the room. I can visualize that. Mm-hmm. So that connection, and then I probably remember next best all the bathrooms. Because when I get nervous, I have to go to the bathroom, and it doesn't matter that I just went. So every stop, every truck stop, because in those days, we went to truck stops. So,
well, that is a very real perspective. So how many times have you been back since?
How many times? said to Donald yesterday, I need to pull out all my old passports and count. Because years ago, when we were counting, I was up in the 40s. But since then,
Wow.
I've done 9 trips in the last number of years. So I don't know. I
So
would,
too many to count.
too many to count or to remember. But, you know, there's a lot of people in this room that I have traveled with. Raise your hand. Richard, Sally, Karen, you know, all those people I've been in Israel with. So
It's very impressive.
oh, and there was that wonderful trip with you, Susan.
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Susan and Richard and Edward Goldberg and I went to Ladispoli when we were bringing Jews from the former Soviet Union to resettle, and we went from there to Israel, and that was a very special time.
So I don't think we talked about that as
No.
part of your work.
Sorry,
But I would love to build off that a little bit. Maybe tell us a little bit about, so you've been to Israel many times, but also, you know, your volunteer work has really intersected with Israel. So tell me about some of the initiatives you've been involved in, and that's one that I didn't know about until right now.
So, Soviet Jewry was a big deal for us here in Birmingham. Resettlement was a big deal, and everybody wanted to participate. Everybody wanted to help. I spoke at Rotary clubs and Kiwanis and church groups and bank presidents, and everybody was willing to help. They understood the need. It was I remember hearing my father talk about simpler times, and so here I am reflecting on what seemed to be simpler times then compared to times now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't simple then, but comparatively it definitely. And then I was there also when we were bringing in the Ethiopians, Operation Solomon.
Oh, wow.
I volunteered to go on that trip and took in 4 or 6 duffel bags of sheets and blankets and tennis shoes and socks. And when I stood up at Temple one morning to say that I was going the next day, would anybody bring things to the house? And Donald said, "Are you crazy? How are you going to do that?" And so I panicked a little bit, remembering El Al check-in. And when I got there with all of these, I thought, do I know her? Can I ask her? There was nobody else from Birmingham, and I thought, who can I ask? And so I get to the guy in the blue and white, you know, with the very stern look, and I told him what the bags were, and he just ushered me through. Never checked a bag, just
Wow.
checked it through. And when I got to the hotel, the bellman took it all to the storage room, and JDC came and picked it all up, and it was easy, really easy. But those were important days. Bringing the Russian Jews to freedom and bringing the Ethiopian Jews out. And I'll segue to the importance of what we're all doing today, the importance of being there and speaking out and doing something.
Yeah.
So, you know, who all has written to your congressman or your senator or the governor, or, you know, so all of you who didn't raise your hand, I challenge you to go home and write letters. And who here has educated somebody, a friend, your hairdresser, your physical trainer, your PT, all those people who wonder, not necessarily they wonder about the blue ribbon, but they wonder about the anguish in your face and in your heart. My trainer told me this morning that your psoas is connected to your feelings, and that those of us who have been so stressed and fearful and anxious and are turning to the fetal position, that our psoas is tightening up, and that's what's pulling us in. And I thought, oh, just our feelings are affecting us physically. Joyce Vance wrote that she's not a stress eater, she's a stress knitter. I thought, God, I need to take out knitting.
That sounds like a very productive way of working on
Yeah.
stress.
Wow.
But I love your call to action, because I think, in listening to you talk about some of the ways that you have been involved in volunteering around Israel, these are such hands-on. I mean, you are flying there with all these bags to help out, and so I think that's a very powerful call and reminder to us all. And I'm curious, though, if you could tell us a little bit about, sort of how you're feeling in this moment. I mean, I think you're getting to that, but how have the last few weeks impacted you?
So, for those of you who don't know, my father was a liberator of Ohrdruf and Mauthausen, and he never went back to Europe, and he never talked about his experiences. And Donald and I went to Mauthausen, and I took pictures, and I bought a book, and in those days, whenever those days were, 2000 something, early, Brookstone had a picture album where you could record a message for the picture. And so I did that for Dad, of what we did in Mauthausen. He never opened the package. He never opened the book. And when my father was dying on his deathbed, and I was talking to him about, him being a hero and whatever, and he started to boo-hoo. And he said, those boys that we left behind, those were the heroes. So I think a lot about, I think about World War II. I think about 1948. I think about the Jews forever. Let's see, who was on the trip where somebody said to Julian Ortal's father-in-law, why do people hate the Jews? This is our history for a very long time. This is not anything new. And the fact that the news media has turned from Israel to Gaza, and now we're the bad guys instead of the victims, it makes me ill. I was listening to a webinar from the Times of Israel right before I came, and David Horvitz was talking about the Zaka volunteers. Zaka is that incredible organization in Israel that comes after there's been a bus bombing or a whatever, and they're trying to make sure a body, all the parts of the body are buried. So, not to be more graphic, but did I do that right, Ortal? Good enough? So, David Horvitz said that the Zaka volunteers cannot even talk about what they have been doing, that it is so horrible. They've never experienced anything like what they're going through, and what they're, that psychologists are being brought in to counsel the Zaka volunteers because they are so impacted. We talk to Julian on a regular basis. I talk to my cousin Jan, who a lot of you know, who lives in Bet Shemesh, as does my cousin Susan and her Jan's son Donnie, and Hadassah's family. You know, we're all trying to stay connected. So for any of you who have family and friends, email them often, WhatsApp them, text them. Just don't forget about them. And don't think it's okay, well, I wrote her last week. Do it regular. And if they don't answer, it's okay. I have one antique dealer in Israel that I have bought things from over the years. So I wrote to him just to ask how he was. So he sends me messages. He calls me Ronna. Hey, Ronna, how are you? And after President Biden was there, oh, Donald has my phone. I can't play it for you. He sent a message about he didn't like President Biden, but President Biden had come and what he had done, and thank God for President Biden. And he said it half a dozen times, thank God for President Biden. So, you know, these, it's all one family, and they need to know that we're thinking about them all the time.
Do you think?
Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes. You know, I don't even remember what the question
I
was
don't
either,
either.
but I think that you answered it. I'm curious, do you think that, you know, when it's safe to do so, you'll go back and try to help out on the ground? Are you already thinking about it?
Well, we have a family trip scheduled in May, the end of May. We took half the family, March. I was trying to remember what month it was. Last March, our family's large, so we took,
So you're splitting into shifts.
well, it was, COVID broke up the first trip of everybody. So, yes, so we have a trip scheduled in May, and we will be going in, you know, whether my children and grandchildren will be going, that's remains to be seen. I can't imagine that we won't, because if we are still in this, you know, it's not just the state of Israel that's at stake, it's all of us. It's all of us as Jews. It's not just the state of Israel. It's every Jew is, you know, I was reading, ADL said the anti-Semitic acts in the last 2 weeks is up 3,000%. So, you know, I'm wearing my Star of David. I'm wearing my blue ribbon. I'm very proudly Jewish. I'm not afraid, but I'm also old. So I can't say that to somebody young to, you know, to be as bold, but I think we have to speak up and speak out, and we have to educate. And you can't educate if you didn't do the lesson plan first. And when I was teaching Sunday school, I would just stay a step ahead of those second graders, you know, study before you talk to them, but you have to be current. And there are lots of, there's lots of information out there, and if you're not getting 10,000 emails, I can put you on my email list, which Valerie can attest to, or Karen, you know, people who get all my regular stuff.
You've given us some really, I think, great words of inspiration here today. Maybe just give us a summary. What do you think are 3 or 4 really important things we should all be doing right now?
Well, if anybody is a nurse or a doctor, you can go volunteer, but that's all that's acceptable right now, except I did volunteer Valerie for, Valerie's a psychologist, and so, or talk.
Just add that they don't need doctors and nurses right now. They're just collecting the information in case it will be very long, and then they will need it. They're building on people being hurt, so they want to have like backup plan. But for now, there's no need in none of the hospitals and community centers. They don't need nurses and doctors.
Glad to know.
They're working in like Shabbat shifts, like very intense shifts, but they don't take extra staff now, not even from Israel.
You know, I think the most important thing you can do is educate yourself and your friends and your circle. Everybody has a circle, and in your circle there are certainly a couple people who don't know and don't understand. And if we don't teach them, they're going to glean from whatever they hear elsewhere. So you be the better teacher. And, you know, we count on the United States government, and if we don't tell all of those congressmen and senators and people in the legislature how important it is. I don't know if you saw Governor Ivey put out a statement that was wonderful. I don't do Facebook, but somebody screenshotted it for me to tell me so. If you want to thank Governor Ivey, it's important.
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate you bringing such tangible advice to our conversation today. Shockingly, we are already wrapping up on our conversation. I'm going to end us on time because Ronnie does need to run out, and so I do want to tell everyone that she's not being rude. She has to get to an appointment. But I would love to end us on a high note because I like to do that. On all of these trips, I'm sure you've had just many wonderful and joyful experiences. Maybe can you describe to us a favorite place or a favorite memory or even a favorite food from one of those trips? Just something to kind of end us on something joyful.
Oh, I'm trying to be joyful, but
I know it's a hard moment.
But the one that sticks with me foremost right now is the emails and phone calls that we have gotten from people we have taken to Israel, from Christian members, the people who have reached out to us, the letters that have gone to Julian that Julian's forwarded to us that of people who understand now.
Yeah.
Of taking them, we only took one trip to Sderot to the border, but they have seen the complications and they have witnessed, and just having that many new friends for Israel has been very important to me. So let's make some new friends for Israel.
Well,
That'll be my high point.
I think that's beautiful, and it's definitely a high point. And I really appreciate you being here today. So can we all give Ronnie a round of applause? Thank you all for coming. And I will tell you that the next one is, am I going to get the date right? 29th or 30th, whatever the Wednesday is of that week. And it will be with Philip Ensler, who's a state representative, and it's going to be fantastic. So hope to see you all there. Same time, same place, and still lunch.
Still lunch.
Before everyone
Yes.
goes, my name is Brooke Bowles. I'm the executive director here at the J. We are so thankful to have you here, to hear Ronnie. Thank you, Margaret. This has been wonderful. We've been excited about this particular presentation for months. I did want to share with you what this is. What is Southern Jewish Voices? So Southern Jewish Voices is a project that we started about a year ago in partnership with the Alabama Humanities Alliance. And the idea behind Southern Jewish Voices was not just to sit in a wonderful room and hear a story. That is wonderful and that's great. But we also want to preserve the stories of Jewish people in Alabama. So equally as important, this event and all of our past events have been archived for us and are on our website. It'll take a couple weeks to get this one up on the website, but you can look back at past events too. I think David Scher's on there, who did an extremely moving talk. And then the last part of this grant with the Alabama Humanities Alliance was that this project is also supposed to help us combat anti-Semitism. I can't remember the exact percentage. I want to say around 30% of people say that they don't know a Jewish person. And so as we're getting excited about Philip Ensler in November, if you have someone that you'd like to include who is not Jewish, or a couple of people, please keep that in mind. That was also part of the intent of the program. And now we are so excited to officially partner with Temple Bethel on this event and future events. And I want to thank the Ted and Marjorie Levitt JCC Fund of the Birmingham Jewish Foundation for their generosity in the lunch today. So thanks again, and we'll see you in November.
This is not about me, and I know this is inappropriate, but desperate times call for inappropriate measures, possibly. I'm Florina, and I am the Assistant Executive Director at the Birmingham Jewish Federation, and there is one other way that you can help our brothers and sisters in Israel, and that is to donate to our Israel Emergency Campaign. And you can do so online at bjf.org. You can send in a check to the Federation. You can email me, you can call me, and I appreciate it. Once again, sorry for bursting out like this, but this is
Here we are. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll see you in November.